In the first 3 months of 2026, the median full-time worker in America earned $1,235 a week before taxes. On paper, that sounds like a decent living. It sounds like rent paid on time, a car that starts every morning, and a refrigerator full of groceries. It sounds like being able to see a doctor when something feels wrong, with enough left over for a child's birthday, a sudden flat tire, or a quiet weekend free from bank account anxiety. But for millions of Americans, that paycheck enters a home where normal life has already sent its invoices. The rent is due. The insurance premium just jumped. The electric bill is higher than expected. And the grocery receipt is longer, even though the cart feels lighter. The car needs work, the deductible is waiting, and the credit card minimum is no longer a small number. The emergency fund, if it even exists, is just trying to survive one more month. This isn't every worker's reality. Some households are doing well, those who bought homes years ago, or those with solid benefits, family support, savings, or a lower local cost of living. But the struggle has become common enough to change what full-time work feels like. The job didn't disappear, the worker didn't stop showing up, and the paycheck still arrives. Yet somehow, for many households, the life that paycheck was supposed to secure keeps drifting further away. For decades, a full-time job carried a promise. Not luxury, not wealth, just a basic American bargain. If you put in the hours, you could build a steady life. A place of your own, a reliable commute, and healthcare that didn't feel like a financial trap. Food without panic math, and a future that wouldn't collapse over a single repair bill. But that bargain weakened. It didn't happen all at once, or because of a single election, a single landlord, or one bad corporate decision. It happened quietly, creeping through the monthly bills. A raise came in dollars, but rent came in hundreds. Insurance came in jumps, and childcare arrived like a second rent payment. Healthcare brought premiums and fine print, transportation brought loans and maintenance, and utilities rose with aging grids, higher demand, and weather-driven usage. Each cost had a perfectly logical explanation, but together they built a trap. And this trap is hard to see because it doesn't always look like poverty. Sometimes it looks like an educated worker with a good career who still can't afford to move out on their own. It looks like a couple earning more than their parents did, but delaying having a child because daycare could erase much of one paycheck. It looks like a homeowner with a fixed mortgage discovering that the mortgage was never the full cost of the house, or a renter who makes too much to be considered poor, but far too little to ever feel secure. That's why this story isn't just about wages. It's about the full price of a normal life in America. In 2026, the question is no longer just whether you have a job. The real question is, after the job pays you, who gets paid first? And once the landlord, the utility company, the insurer, the grocery store, and the childcare provider have taken their cut, what's actually left of the life full-time work was supposed to buy? That is the hidden crisis. Not unemployment, not a streak of bad luck, but a structural shift. A full-time job still buys an income, but for many, it no longer automatically buys stability. To understand why, we have to look past the headlines, because while the official numbers say workers are earning more, ordinary life keeps feeling smaller. The official data doesn't say workers are making less. In the first quarter of 2026, median weekly earnings for full-time workers were actually up 3.4% from the previous year. That's an important detail, because this isn't a story about people refusing to work or wages completely stagnating. The country is full of people doing exactly what was asked of them. In fact, the Bureau of Labor Statistics counted roughly 121 million full-time workers in that same quarter. People are clocking in, driving shifts before sunrise, answering emails after dinner, and managing schedules that are already overflowing. The paycheck is there. But that's exactly what makes the problem so frustrating. A paycheck can rise and still fail to restore the life it used to guarantee. In that same time frame, the government noted consumer prices rose 2.7%. On paper, it looks like workers gained ground. Budget reality, however, isn't lived on paper, and families don't pay the consumer price index. They pay the landlord, the electric company, the car note, and the grocery store. This is where macroeconomics meets reality. Inflation isn't just a single percentage point. It's experienced as a gauntlet of bad timing. Rent hits on the 1st. The car breaks down on the 12th. The utility bill spikes after a summer heat wave, and a medical bill arrives long after the appointment is over. Meanwhile, the grocery trip happens every single week, completely indifferent to whether wages went up or not. A worker might get a raise once a year, but the world reprices itself constantly. By May of 2026, another Bureau of Labor Statistics metric revealed that real average hourly earnings had actually dropped by 0.7% compared to the year before. This doesn't mean every household is failing, but it highlights the core contradiction. One truth says workers are holding more dollars, while the other truth shows those dollars entering a world where stability has become more expensive and less forgiving. The old bargain promised that steady work brought steady progress. The new math says steady work might just let you stay even. And staying even isn't the same as moving forward. It means you can fix the car, but your savings account won't grow. It means you can pay the rent, but moving becomes an impossible financial risk. It means you have health insurance, but the deductible turns a doctor's visit into a stressful calculation. You're not underwater yet, but you spend every month holding your breath. This is the cost stack at work. The paycheck is measured at the top, before it faces taxes, rent, healthcare, childcare, transportation, and debt. A full-time job remains real, necessary, and honorable, but it is no longer structured to buy the full life people were promised. The bargain didn't snap overnight. It eroded year by year, bill by bill, until a normal lifestyle became something workers could see, but never securely hold. There was no single morning where the American dream vanished. The shift was slower, disguised as small, isolated adjustments. A rent hike here, a higher insurance deductible there, a grocery bill that creeps up just enough to change what goes into your cart, or a thermostat setting that suddenly feels like a high-stakes financial decision. Each bill had its own industry explanation, but the worker only ever had one paycheck to absorb them all. Full-time work was never a guarantee of wealth, but it used to guarantee forward motion. You worked hard so you could rent your own place, eventually buy a home, and raise children without every month feeling like a financial cliff. That was the emotional anchor of the paycheck. Over time, however, the paycheck stopped acting like a ladder and started acting like a gate fee. Instead of moving you forward, your income increasingly pays for permission just to stay right where you are. To keep the apartment, keep the car running, keep the insurance active, and keep your credit score from cratering. That isn't building a life, it's maintaining access to one. The federal minimum wage tells a stark version of this timeline, remaining frozen at $7.25 an hour since July of 2009. But this crisis has expanded far beyond the wage floor. The pressure has climbed upward, reaching full-time workers with degrees, trade certifications, multiple jobs, and dual-income households. The definition of enough kept moving. It used to mean food and shelter. Today, enough means rent, groceries, transit, premiums, deductibles, childcare, minimum debt payments, and an emergency fund large enough to withstand a sudden disaster. By 2024, the Census Bureau placed the real median household income at $83,730. Noting it hadn't statistically changed from the year prior. That isn't a small number, and that is precisely why the situation feels so uncomfortable. When a historically solid income still leaves a household fighting for basic stability, the problem is structural. A home is no longer just rent or a mortgage. It's an evolving stack of property taxes, insurance premiums, and utility rates. A job isn't just wages. It's the cost of commuting, childcare logistics, and the pressure of knowing that losing employment may also mean losing your healthcare network. Normal life used to ask if you could afford this month. Now it asks if you can afford this month while surviving whatever breakdown, rent hike, or medical emergency might hit you next month. People are following the rules and still feeling completely stuck, realizing that independence feels harder, and adulthood is essentially rented month to month. We still speak about getting a job as if it's the finish line, when for millions, it's just the entry fee to a map where the same paycheck buys a completely different life depending on where you stand. The paycheck might be measured by national averages, but the cost of survival is entirely local. In one city, the trap is an exploding rental market. In a suburb, it's a grueling, car-dependent commute. On the coast, it's an insurance crisis. The national economy gives us clean mathematical averages, but human beings don't live inside averages. They live in specific zip codes, utility zones, and school districts where moving just 10 miles can completely shatter a household budget. Being employed doesn't tell us if a worker can actually afford to live anywhere near their workplace. It doesn't tell us if housing eats half their income, or if they're forced to drive an hour each way because public transit doesn't reach the warehouse or the hospital shift. Take renters, for instance. Census data from 2023 showed that over 21 million renter households were officially cost-burdened, spending more than 30% of their income on housing. That's nearly half of all renters in America. And housing isn't just another line item. It dictates everything. It decides where you sleep, where your kids go to school, how much time you waste on the road, and whether you have any capacity left to save. When housing takes too much, it shrinks the entire life around it. In a car-dependent country, transportation becomes a secondary, hidden rent. Moving further away to find cheaper housing looks good on paper, until that discount is swallowed by gasoline, tires, and mechanical repairs. You save on rent only to pay on the asphalt. And unlike a streaming app, you can't cancel your car when money gets tight. For most workers, that vehicle is the only bridge between a paycheck and survival. Then there is the insurance crisis. In 2023, census figures revealed that 5.4 million American homeowners were paying $4,000 or more a year just for property insurance. In Florida alone, that accounted for 1.2 million households. This isn't just a weather headline. It's an everyday reality that lands directly inside a fixed mortgage via the escrow account. A family thinks they bought stability with a fixed-rate loan, only to watch the local risk market quietly reprice their address. Two people can earn the exact same wage but live completely different economic lives based entirely on the map. One has a short drive and family nearby to help with the kids. The other drives 40 miles each way and hands a massive chunk of their income to a childcare center. The paycheck is identical, but the life it buys is not. To make sense of this, we have to look at the three distinct forces driving the squeeze: the paycheck, the cost stack, and the transfer of risk. First, the paycheck operates on a structural mismatch. A job pays you in hours and weeks, but life charges you in months, contracts, and unexpected emergencies. A worker can calculate their hourly rate, but they have to survive a gauntlet of compounding due dates. The paycheck is a single stream of income running into a house with a dozen open doors. Second is the cost stack itself. In 2024, the Bureau of Labor Statistics noted that average annual expenditures per consumer unit hovered around $78,535. Housing alone swallowed over $26,000, while transportation demanded over $13,000. Combined, just having a place to live and a way to get to work consumed more than half of all average household spending. That is before a single dollar is spent on groceries, medicine, childcare, or debt. These aren't optional luxury choices. You cannot opt out of shelter, utilities, or the insurance required to keep your life legal and functional. The job stops funding a future because it is entirely occupied defending the present. This leads directly to the third force: risk. A full life isn't just about paying your regular bills, it's about having the capacity to absorb abnormal ones. But the American bargain has shifted that entire burden onto the individual family budget. Insurance is supposed to protect you, but the premium becomes its own monthly stressor. Healthcare is supposed to heal you, but a high deductible turns medical care into a dangerous financial gamble. Credit cards protect the current month, but the interest suffocates the next one. Normal life has been transformed into a costly monthly subscription. Miss one payment, and the road ahead narrows instantly. The true human cost of this system rarely looks like a dramatic eviction or a foreclosure sign. Usually, it looks completely ordinary. It's a worker sitting in their car in pre-dawn traffic, a parent quietly checking their banking app in the grocery aisle, a couple staring at a spreadsheet after their children have gone to bed. These households are functioning, making dinners, and making their minimum payments, but beneath the surface, the margin is razor-thin. In 2025, the Federal Reserve reported that 63% of adults could cover a $400 emergency expense with cash. That means a majority had some cushion, but it also highlights a large share of adults without that specific cash cushion ready. In American life, a $400 surprise isn't a rare anomaly. It's a tire blowout, a dental copay, or a utility catch-up bill. When you can't absorb a surprise, you start stretching groceries, delaying doctor's visits, staying in jobs you dislike, and postponing major life milestones like having children or buying a home. Even though the Federal Reserve found that 73% of adults in 2025 reported they were doing okay or living comfortably, that phrase hides an immense amount of structural stress. Doing okay often means the bills are paid, but the savings are empty. It means you are housed, but entirely trapped in place. It turns tax refunds into repair funds and credit cards into primary shock absorbers. Worst of all, because people constantly hear that the economy is strong and wages are up, they look at their empty bank accounts and assume the failure must be entirely personal. But a budget is structural. You can make all the responsible choices in the world and still be ground down by the sheer cost of the essentials. The crisis manifests in the specific receipts we cannot avoid. Look at food. By May of 2026, the official food index was up 3.1% over the year, with groceries up 2.7%. These figures might seem modest compared to recent historical spikes, but groceries are a recurring necessity. The pressure shows up quietly in the cart. Skipping the healthier options, putting back the snacks, and performing nervous mental math before reaching the register. Look at electricity, which jumped 5.9% over the year by May 2026. A heat wave is no longer just a weather event. It's a bill forming in real time, transforming the thermostat into a high-stakes budgeting tool. Look at shelter, up 3.4% in that same period. When rent or housing costs move, everything else is forced to adjust. Food budgets shrink, savings stall, and medical care decisions are compromised. Even relationships bend under the weight, as moving in with roommates or delaying a family become financial calculations rather than personal choices. Medical care services rose 3.6% over the year by May 2026. But the real crisis is the systemic uncertainty that makes an insured worker hesitate to book an appointment, wondering what the hidden costs will look like weeks later. Transportation maintenance and repairs spiked 6.1% in that same time frame. In a sprawling country, a broken car isn't an inconvenience. It is an immediate threat to your employment. Then there is childcare, which national averages placed at over $13,000 a year in 2024. It turns employment into a brutal math problem, where a second income is almost entirely consumed by the cost of the care required to earn it. When every single access point to normal society requires an escalating monthly fee, a full-time paycheck starts to feel less like a foundation and more like a passcode that must be repurchased every 30 days. These numbers are not a perfect one-to-one household calculator. They come from different data sets, but together they reveal the same pressure from different angles. Income is measured one way, while normal life charges through many channels. If we look at the raw data together, the true shape of the pressure system becomes clear. In early 2026, The median full-time wage sat at $1,235 a week before taxes. Meanwhile, average expenditures from 2024 show housing and transit alone, consuming more than half of typical annual spending. With nearly half of all American renters spending over 30% of their income on shelter in 2023, the baseline for security is deeply compromised. Add to that an average monthly electric bill that sat at $144 in 2024 and was expected to average $178 during the summer of 2025, further exacerbated by a 5.9% price hike by mid-2026. Healthcare premiums for employer-sponsored family plans reached $26,993 in 2025, with workers personally contributing an average of $6,850, on top of average single deductibles near $1,900. Total household debt scaled to a massive $18.8 trillion by the first quarter of 2026, with 4.8% of that debt slipping into some stage of delinquency. The numbers don't coordinate with each other. The landlord doesn't care that the mechanic just took your cash, and the utility company won't pause because childcare costs rose. To keep this honest, we have to acknowledge that America is not a uniform landscape of financial collapse. Many households are managing, adapting, and finding ways through. Wages have risen in some measures, and work still has enormous value. But the presence of those doing well does not negate the structural narrowing of the road for millions of others. The point is not that work has no value. The point is that work now has to carry more essential costs, more risk, and less margin than many families expected. Personal agency matters, but a personal budget cannot rewrite a tight housing market, negotiate every hospital bill, or lower grocery prices. When margin vanishes, freedom goes with it. The next phase of this crisis isn't a sudden, visible cliff. It's a quiet, exhausting redesign of life. It's a generational shift where people stop asking what they can build and start asking what they can desperately afford to keep. When the day ends, a worker comes home, sets their keys on the counter, and pulls up a banking app. From the outside, the lights are on, the car is parked, and everything looks completely normal. But beneath the surface, the space to breathe, to get sick, or to save for a better tomorrow has been squeezed out. A full-time job still buys survival, but it has stopped buying stability. And as the bills are spread across the kitchen table once again, the ultimate question remains: after everyone else has taken their share, what is actually left of the life that work was supposed to buy?